All right, we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another one, guys. And today we are going to talk about the Indianapolis Colts first round selection, Latu. Talk about him and ask the question: is Latu the final piece to this Indianapolis Colts defensive line? But before we do that, just want to let you guys know this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to go visit prizepicks.com or use their mobile app today. When you sign up, use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match. Also, just want to add as well that Caitlin Clark is playing her first game as a part of the Indiana Fever coming up here this Tuesday, May 14th. And so Prize Picks actually has a new free square that they want us to talk about today and let you know all about this. So essentially, this game between the Indiana Fever and the Connecticut Sun is going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 14th. And Prize Picks wants to offer this square. And if Caitlin Clark scores more than 1 point, then the square wins. So be sure, if you're signed up, there's a timer on this square, so be sure to add it to your lineup before the timer ends. So be sure to go check that out, guys. But without further ado, let's jump right into this, Derek. So here's what's interesting, Derek. So coming into this offseason, I know there was a lot of people, when viewing the Indianapolis Colts needs on their team, a lot of people were saying wide receiver, a lot of people were saying defensive back, and then the more of the minority, and I was in this minority, and I think you were to a different degree as well, we were in the minority saying, hey, think about pass rush for a minute, right? We were thinking about that, right? A lot of people weren't talking about it. I didn't know if the Colts would actually view it the way that we were going to view it, but we were saying pass rush is important because, yes, you look on the surface, the Indianapolis Colts broke a franchise record when it came to sacks. Everybody's like, wow, okay, so pass rush is checked off the check mark. You don't have to worry about it this year. And the way that I kind of looked at it, Derek, is I said, yeah, okay, sacks are nice. The sacks can be often misleading. And when you dove a little bit deeper into some of the stats, specifically the pass rush rate, right, get the consistency at getting after the quarterback. While the sacks looked all pretty and nice, they were, one of the top teams at getting after the quarterback. When you dove a little bit deeper, and when you looked at it over this course of the season with your own two eyes, you saw way too often, Derek, quarterbacks sitting back there in the pocket, not even getting touched, right? You saw it in multiple games. You saw it in the Cincinnati game. You saw it in the Atlanta game. You saw it in the last two games of the season, the Raider game, and especially the Houston game, right? You saw it, and it became more and more of a trend, it felt like, especially with the teams that actually, and even some not, but it seemed like especially with some of those teams that actually had like pretty good teams, right, around them. The Colts didn't, go crazy in the sacks against some of these teams, right? There was a lot of inconsistency at getting after the quarterback against some of these teams that had, some pieces in place already, right? So while the Colts defensive line in total, they were fine, like they were still fine, there was still an element missing, Derek, from this Colts defensive line, primarily looking at that number one alpha pass rusher, right? It was something that we've talked about, gosh, Derek, I don't even know. It's been years and years and years that I feel like I say this over and over, and the Colts go, it seems like, with kind of a Band-Aid option or not the, big splash move, if you will. And you've seen, kind of the mixed results of that, right? But this year was different for the Colts, right? And we thought, man, the Colts need to, if they're not going to draft one, I said this, they need to go out, they need to get some sort of defensive lineman, right, in free agency. We saw and we heard from what Stephen Holder told us of ESPN, we heard that the Colts were going all in on a player like Danielle Hunter. They were going in on Danielle Hunter. They were going to pay him a ton of money. Ultimately, he ended up signing elsewhere. He signed with the Houston Texans for less money because it's his hometown. We're obviously bummed about that. That's a big bummer, no doubt about that. But that kind of led us to asking the question, Derek, was that just a situation where the Colts viewed it and said, he's a player we can't afford to not go after? Or was it a situation where the Colts saw what we were saying and saying, hey, our pass rush, while it looks good on the surface, it wasn't good consistently for 17 games, right? And the Colts, I think, shocked a lot of people when they went and they took Latu in the first round, the best pure pass rusher in this draft. Definitely shocked a lot of people when that happened. And there's a lot of people who were not happy because they wanted a defensive back, they wanted a corner. But Derek, the Colts added Latu, and when you look at his, overall game the last 2 years at UCLA, I mean, there's no doubt. We talked about it. There's no doubt that Latu has the makings to be that alpha, to be that number one pass rusher for the Indianapolis Colts. So talk to me about kind of your thoughts on the defensive line from last year and then the Latu pick and just what that means looking forward for the Colts.
Yeah, we've mentioned this several times on this podcast at this point, and I feel like it is a number that we're going to have to continue to keep bringing up because people are just either not going to understand it or just refuse to not flat out believe it. Again, when your team was top 5 in sacks that year, yes, you were. But at the same time, the remaining other numbers that shows that you had an effective pass rush, they just weren't there. Yes, overall, the sack numbers definitely were very good, and that's something you want to continue to try and do. But at the same time, we mentioned it, when your defensive line is bottom of the barrel when it comes to overall pass rush effectiveness, then the numbers oftentimes don't correlate. That can mean you probably did insanely well against a couple bad teams, but then some other teams come along and you just did flat out terrible. And that was what happened for the majority of the year, Cody. I mean, we had those times. There'd be a game or two where the Indianapolis Colts would go and they get like 6-7 sacks in a game, which is absolutely great. But at the same time, the next game or two, they just would get maybe 1 sack, maybe. So it's kind of one of those situations you want to find the most effective and the most consistent group of guys you can to try to make things good for your defensive line. Now, here's the thing, Cody. I will give credit to the people that look only at the numbers and the people that point to Gus Bradley, because the issue you have is, unfortunately, the Indianapolis Colts run a defensive scheme that is insanely pass heavy and relies mostly on 4-man fronts to win at the line of scrimmage. Mostly. You and I have seen it since Gus Bradley has been in with the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts are dead last in blitz percentage on defense. So this is a team that does not like to take a ton of risks. They don't do a lot of blitzing. They want to win with their front four and keep as many guys in the backfield as humanly possible to make sure that they can keep their guys covering the grass and making sure there's less avenues to be able to get some good plays by the offense. And, at times that works. It has allowed for the Indianapolis Colts to get a few more turnovers from time to time, but it leaves you in the hands of the defensive line. And I mean, what exactly is the defensive line going to be able to do? Well, the thing is you have a DeForest Buckner who is insanely great at what he does. The only problem is he gets double teamed, I think, the 4th most of any defensive tackle in the entire NFL. There's only a couple guys in recent memory, and one of the guys that was in the top is now retired, right? So, I mean, Chris Jones and I think maybe Quinnen Williams, I believe, might be the only 2 guys that get double teamed more than DeForest Buckner. So that results in you needing the pressure to come from elsewhere. And you don't have somebody right now that can consistently take over games. You don't have one of those guys. So I will say this, is Latu going to be the guy right away that is going to do that? I'm not sure. I don't think he's going to immediately be a TJ Watt. I'm not insinuating that. There's no way the first year Latu goes out and gets himself 16, 17, 18 sacks.
If he does it, everybody clip this right now. If he does this,
everybody clip it. Please do it. I do not believe Latu is getting 15 plus sacks next year, but boom. Again, if he does, I mean, I would never be happier in my life to eat crow, okay? Honestly. But the biggest, and one of the other biggest aspects of this is bringing in Charlie Partridge. I think that's the other aspect of this that isn't quite getting talked about as much anymore, just simply because Partridge is a guy that knows how to work those defensive lines. He's been around the league. He's been around college. He knows a lot of these guys, and he understands how a defensive line works. He's very knowledgeable and knows how to work in the scheme that Gus Bradley's trying to run. And like I said, if you're going to run the defense that Gus Bradley is running, you got to get pressure up front. So you went out, you got a new defensive line coach to hopefully help fix that, to get more production out of all your guys. And then you drafted the best pass rusher in the draft to hopefully, over the next few years, Latu will be that guy that consistently gets double-digit sacks every season. And that will be where you're going to start paying this guy good money, because he is a guy that every single year, every single week, you have to game plan for this guy. So I really do hope Latu is that answer. I don't know if he's going to do it right away, but he's definitely a guy that later on, as he continues to learn the game of the NFL, he's going to be so much better. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, college basketball, other entries like that today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So, for example, for basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game and does not return in the second half of a game, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays alive. As you guys obviously know, NBA playoffs are going on right here, right now. Of course, I'm following the Pacers and the Knicks very, very closely. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Yeah, and I guess when you look at this Colts defensive line, I mean, we've talked about it before, Derek. I mean, there's literally, like, you could have 2 different starting units out here. Like, you really could. That's how deep this defensive line is. I mean, in addition to already having, Latu, like we just talked about, I mean, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Samson Ebukam. And then that's just the first unit. Then you got guys like Kwity Paye, Dayo Adangbo, Adi Tomiwa Adebawari from last year, and a few other guys as well. Probably some guys I'm missing. You know what I mean? You just have a ton of guys here that you can factor into this defensive line. And it's going to be hard, Derek, for the Colts to figure out who's going to make their roster, because it's such an insanely deep group. I mean, bringing back the guys you brought back and just having the guys you already had on your roster, it's definitely going to be intriguing, right? Especially for some of these young guys that we think potentially could take a step, like Adi Tomiwa, or even a guy like Dayo Adangbo could even get better this year. And even Kwity Paye. I know we write him off a lot, but he could. He could get better as a pass rusher. We already know he's really good at stopping the run, but could he get even better in that department? Still a lot of guys that are, 25 and under. So that's definitely exciting for the Indianapolis Colts. But, I mean, Latu, like we talked about, he's just a guy that he has that potential, I think, at getting after the passer and getting after the quarterback that, honestly, we haven't seen in the Chris Ballard era. Like, I'm not saying, like you said, he may not come out right away and be one of the best pass rushers in the NFL his rookie season. But the ceiling for this guy is, I think, mountains higher, Derek, than anybody the Colts have brought into this building when it comes to the edge position. And I think that's definitely exciting for the Indianapolis Colts. And if you're a Colts fan, and even heck, Charlie Parcher's got to be excited for that, and Gus Bradley as well, having a guy that, has that superstar potential. I know you made a video about that, Derek, so everybody go check that out. There's the plug for that. But just having a guy like Latu who has that potential to become that guy is definitely very exciting. And definitely very, I think it just would be so helpful to guys like DeForest Buckner, who's been doing it for so many years, playing at a very high level, getting after the passer. But like you mentioned, just been double teamed because there's not been a real threat on the outside, a consistent threat, I should say, on the outside. So I think it's just going to help in so many different ways for this Colts defense, and really looking forward to seeing what Latu does even his rookie season and just seeing how good he truly can be from day one. So looking forward to that. But Derek, any other thoughts here on Latu, his kind of role with this defensive line or anything like that?
I think that Latu is going to be a great player this year, and I'm super excited to see, how much he impacts this defensive line from a personnel standpoint to a production standpoint. Every single aspect of this, I'm all for, and I will keep my eyes glued to Latu this year for sure.
Absolutely. Well, guys, let us know your thoughts here on Latu. Is he a final piece for the Indianapolis Colts defensive line? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. But, guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.